How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Next Goal Wins TV. Today we're going to be previewing the big match on Saturday. Manchester City hosting Chelsea at the Etihad, and it's a pretty big match for a couple of reasons. First of all, we're starting to get close to the last third of the Premier League season. I think every single point is going to matter. And obviously the first match between these two was the very first match of the season, Manchester City dominating Chelsea, and I think it was a good time to play against Chelsea because it was when Enzo Maresca had just came in, still kind of trying to teach the tactics to Chelsea, and Manchester City were in a much better spot than they are now currently. You guys know this. I mean, obviously Manchester City hasn't looked good in a couple months now, if you think about it. Chelsea, much better than they were last season, but still not looking great, still a little inconsistent. Only one win in their last 6 Premier League matches, which was the last match against Wolves. And even in that 3-1 win, for all of the attacking players that they have, they don't look as convincing as they should. And before we get started, don't forget to go ahead in the comment section, let me know what your predictions are as far as the score for this match. If anybody gets it right, they get some free Champion Grind grip socks, as well as some Next Goal Wins stickers. So put it in the comment section what your prediction for this game is, and let's get started. Right now, Chelsea sit in 4th place with 40 points, Manchester City in 5th place with 38. So that means if Manchester City beats Chelsea, they will jump into the 4th spot, and then Chelsea will drop out of the top 4. Still a lot left to play for, but I think just looking at the upcoming games for like a team like Nottingham Forest, I think Nottingham Forest is going to drop a few points. And I said this in my prediction video not too long ago, but I do think Nottingham Forest is going to drop out of the top 4, and I think Manchester City and Chelsea are going to climb back up into those last 2 spots of the top 4. I'm going to tell you what I think the score is going to be. Before we do that, let's talk a little bit about each team, and then we'll go into the predicted lineups for the match. So first of all, City, like I said, 4-2 loss was the last match against PSG. I think that match highlighted a lot of defensive issues. I think Manchester City are in a point now where they haven't been before, and what I mean by that is that typically Manchester City, any time that there's a slight possibility that the players that they have are not performing at the highest levels, they always manage to have enough players on the bench and on the roster to kind of just take those spots. So some of the older players, as you notice that they're not performing well, some of the younger players step up and perform really well. And I think this is the first time in a long time that Manchester City has kind of a gap between the current players that they have right now and nobody really coming in underneath that's taking their spot and performing at a really good level right now. And when you look at their bench, this is also the first time that I feel like Manchester City doesn't have a bench that, you know, all of those players could be in the starting 11 of another top Premier League team. I think if you look at players like Bernardo Silva, Ilkay Gundogan, Kevin De Bruyne, those are all guys that are starting to get past their prime and they're not starting to perform as consistently for City. And especially when they have that many really good attacking players, the first thing that starts to fall off is their fitness. And then because of their fitness falling off, they're no longer defending as much as they used to be when they were a little bit younger. So that's kind of my analysis, because now I look at it and I see a lot of teams being able to beat Manchester City in the transition. PSG did a really good job of getting a lot of opportunities, scoring a couple goals in the transition moments, just because Manchester City leaves way too many players up high. But then the other area where they've been lacking that I've seen has been the first time in a long time that I've seen City struggle with is building out in possession. Teams are starting to high press Manchester City and actually win the ball back and be able to score off of it. And it's very rare in the last few years to see Manchester City give up a goal when they were trying to build out in possession, lose the ball in their own defensive third, and then another team score. So those are, I think, some of the issues that are going on with Manchester City. However, I have said this before, I do think that Manchester City is one of those teams that, because of the financial backing, they've already done some really good stuff in the transfer window. They've already gotten a couple of young players. Because of that, because they have Pep, I think they're never going to get to a point in which they're going to really fall off. Like I said in my prediction for who's going to finish in the top 4 of the Premier League halfway through the season, I still think Manchester City is going to finish in top 4. As for Chelsea, extremely boring performance against Wolves. I said this in my analysis. I think Chelsea have way too many really good and young and in their prime attacking players in order to have some lackluster performances. The win against Wolves was good, but it just showcased that they still have a lot to work on as far as making the most of their opportunities. And when they play against a really good team like Manchester City, it scares me to think what's going to happen in the transition, just because Chelsea commits so many numbers forward with the way that they play. However, they are well rested. They haven't had any games this week, while Manchester City and a lot of the other top Premier League teams have played in the Champions League. So they've had a full week of training and they're able to get a lot of their players back and fit. However, I do see the same issue with Chelsea that I see with Manchester City, which is they just have way too many attacking players. Sometimes they go from building in a 3-2-5 to a 2-3-5, and that front line of 5 that they leave up there is just a lot of attacking players who do not defend. Anytime that a team team presses them well enough to where Chelsea can't get the ball up high enough to those players to be able to create, it takes 5 players out of the equation, and then it makes it easy for teams to get back into the game. So that's the part that I think Chelsea struggles with. But as far as the quality of players that they have, I actually think that Chelsea has a better squad currently than Manchester City. So let's go into the predicted lineups so I can show you guys exactly how I think that they're going to set up. Manchester City has had the same back line in their last 2 matches, so I think they'll keep Nunez, Akanji, Diaz, and Vardiol in the back line. I think they have to have someone like Kovacic. They cannot afford to put somebody else in that position just because Kovacic, out of the front 6, there's no real defensive type players. Everybody else is very attack minded, so you need to have somebody in that 6th position who's going to be able to deal with Cole Palmer, who's going to be able to deal with Moises Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez, Cucurella coming in. So I don't think De Bruyne and Silva are going to be able to do that. So I think Kovacic plays in that center mid, in that 6th position. Foden out on the right, Doku out on the left. I think that's probably going to be the only changes. It could either be Savinho on the left instead of Doku. I think Doku's a little bit more dangerous in the attack. He's able to create a lot of 1v1 situations, and even if he can't get a good cross off, he manages to get the ball in a dangerous area. De Bruyne, who hasn't been having the best of games, is going to play underneath Haaland with Silva, and again I think he could go for Silva or he could go for Ilkay Gundogan in that role. And obviously the man who just signed a 9.5-year contract, Erling Haaland, is going to be playing as the number 9. And while I usually don't even have to think about the goalkeepers, it has been a little bit of a switch up with Manchester City. They started with Ederson. After the bad run of results, they went with Stefan Ortega, and now he's back to Ederson, and I think he's going to stick with Ederson for the next few matches at least. As for Chelsea, Robert Sanchez in goal, Reece James, as long as he doesn't get injured from now until the match, Tosin and Chalobah as the 2 center backs, and then Cucurella as the left back, when in reality Cucurella, he plays a little bit more like a left midfielder because they always just build out with those back 3. In the middle, Chelsea typically like to leave Caicedo by himself. Enzo Fernandez has had an injury. He's got a muscle fatigue, as I think is what they officially called it. He's doubtful for the game, but I think if he's anywhere between 75 and 100%, he's probably going to start over Dewsbury Hall. I don't think Dewsbury Hall is ready for a match of this level, so I think as long as Enzo Fernandez is somewhat good, he'll play in that center mid position. And he plays really a little bit more closer to Cole Palmer than he does with Moises Caicedo. And then you have Madueke on the right, Pedro Neto on the left, and Nico Jackson up top. He might go with Sancho, for example, instead of Neto, but I think these are his best 3 attacking players. And obviously Cole Palmer, there's no debating that one. He's going to start and he's going to play. So how does Manchester City win? I think there's a couple of ways that Manchester City will manage to get a result. The first one is they have to get more service to Haaland. You got a guy that's worth a crazy amount of money, who everyone knows is less mobile as far as how much he does in the build up to the attack, and more so just getting the ball in the final third in the box or on a run in behind, and he's going to be able to put it away. I think Manchester City have struggled with getting him the ball enough, and teams have done a really good job, specifically teams like Arsenal, when they just man mark Erling Haaland with one of their center backs. I think if Chelsea does that with Chalobah or Tosin, I think Erling Haaland will have a quiet night. But Manchester City has to find ways to get him the ball more often. I think the other one, like I said, they haven't been very good in possession, or at least as good as they have been in the past. I think Manchester City needs to keep the ball as far away from Chelsea as possible, and that means they need to put themselves in a position where they're getting 56 to 65% of possession in the match, which I don't think they're going to do, but if they do that and they limit the amount of times that Cole Palmer gets on the ball, that's going to be a good way for them to try and win the game. The other one, and I said this earlier, they can't overplay. If they try and overplay in the build-out and Chelsea manages to win the ball, Chelsea are going to score a goal just because they have so many good attacking players. So Manchester City needs to find the right balance between building out and maybe going a little bit more direct to Haaland and making sure that they don't overplay at the back. They also can't let Chelsea get past the first line of pressure. So off the ball from Manchester City, when Chelsea are building, they cannot let Chelsea find a way to get the ball out wide to the wingers. Chelsea do such a good job of just kind of bypassing the midfield if a team is pressing in the middle, and if a team starts getting stretched out, then Cole Palmer and Moises Caicedo can get on the ball in the middle. There's a lot of ways for Chelsea to get the ball up the field, really easy ways for them to do it, and I think Manchester City has to limit that if they want to have a chance of winning the game. As far as Chelsea and how Chelsea wins, the biggest one I've noticed throughout the season is that they have to find ways to free up Cole Palmer. Anytime a team does well to eliminate Cole Palmer from getting on the ball, Chelsea are completely useless, if I'm being honest. Cole Palmer goes missing and Chelsea goes missing. And I think because he's just so effective in being able to get them in good positions, I think they struggle when he's having a bad game. He does a really good job of popping into the middle at the right times, almost like playing a false 9 or a false 10, where he starts in these positions behind the midfield line and in between the center backs and the midfielders. And even when teams feel like they're front screening him and they've blocked him off, he somehow manages to pop in at the right spaces and be able to get on the ball. So I think as long as he can continue doing that, Chelsea are going to have a good night. The other one is they have to create a lot of 1v1s with their wide players. Pedro Neto's such a dangerous player. Madueke is such a dangerous player. If they can go against Vardiol, if they can go against Mateus Nunez, I think they have a really good opportunity of getting a lot of things in the box. And I think Nico Jackson and Cole Palmer in the box when the ball gets crossed in or wherever the ball ends up falling, they're going to have a lot of opportunities to score. And then the last one, the easiest one for me, which I thought, honestly, I wouldn't say ever against Manchester City, is you got to high press them. They are not as good in possession as they used to be. I think there's a lot of pressure on them right now. They're making a lot of mistakes out of the back. As long as Chelsea really goes in and high presses Manchester City, they win back possession. I think they'll score on the transition. But even if they don't score on the transition, as long as Chelsea can restart the play and build out of the back, gives them more possession and gives them a lot more opportunities to get the ball into their wingers in really good positions. I think it's going to be a really good game. I think it's going to be a tactical battle between Enzo Maresca and Pep Guardiola, two managers that clearly know each other very well, as Enzo Maresca was one of Pep's assistants a few years ago. So I think they know each other well. They've studied each other's tactics. It's very clear to just a general fan what each of them are trying to do. I think ultimately it's going to come down to individual battles, individual talent, who's got the better players on the pitch, more so than it is going to be their tactics. And right now, I favor Chelsea as far as the individual talent that's going to be on the pitch. So I'm going to go 2-1. Chelsea wins at the Etihad. Chelsea stays firmly in fourth place, and Manchester City are going to have to wait a little bit longer to step into those top 4 positions for the Champions League. So make sure you guys check in on this channel a little bit after the game is over. I'm going to do a full tactical analysis of the match, let you know kind of what went wrong, what went right for each team, and kind of how it all went down after the match is over. Anytime there's a big match at the weekend, we're going to try and do these pre-match previews as well as the tactical analysis after that. So that's it for this one, guys. We'll catch you in the next one.